I think that if there isn't a strong Europe in the world, then the future of the world will be decided by China and America without much reference to Europe. So it's a big and important choice about whether or not we want a strong European voice. I want a strong European voice.
And to go with that voice, there must be a face for the Union to take its proper place on the world stage.
Welcome back to this edition of World Insight. Let's move now to Brussels for the next part of this programme. There's a diplomatic joke that asks who countries should talk to when they want to talk to Europe. Now, from next year, the answer could be the man in this picture, the President of the European Union. On Thursday, the EU picked Herman van Rompuy, an economist with a fondness for poetry who is almost entirely unknown outside of his native Belgium. Meanwhile, British peer Baroness Ashton is the new foreign minister, even though she herself knew she was being nominated for the post only hours before being chosen. Why does the EU need a president, and what exactly will Herman van Rompuy do?
They call him Mr. Europe. Unfamiliar maybe, but the EU's new face. Who is he? Herman van Rompuy, the Belgian Prime Minister, will be the EU's president. Why Van Rompuy? He's a strong centre-right leader. The 62-year-old economist came to office 1 year ago following a banking crisis. He's proved a steady hand running a difficult coalition. His collaborators describe him as hard-working and discreet, and a skillful negotiator. Critics describe him as low-profile, careful and humble. There was no public campaign for the post. The appointment was decided by the leaders of 27 EU member states over Thursday's dinner in Brussels.
There's the political balance, there's a geographic balance, there's a gender balance. There's an issue of competence that should not be entirely forgotten when we are in this balancing business. I don't think there will be, there has yet to happen in the history of Europe a solution that is particularly perfect from all possible points of view. So you have to strike the best possible balance, taking all of these things into account in the process.
Indeed, the early favourite was Britain's former Prime Minister, Tony Blair. The 55-year-old Blair has long been a charismatic heavyweight on the international stage. Even after standing down, he's still busy, acting as the Middle East envoy, part-time advisor of US investment bank JP Morgan, and an eloquent speaker around the world.
And to disable the extreme.
But the international superstar has his inerasable handicaps. His support for the US-led Iraq war in 2003 didn't win him credit. He comes from a country which is out of the Eurozone and is not in the Schengen area of visa-free travel. And his candidacy lacked the backing of France and Germany, which have a big say in the bloc.
The task of the president is to liaise internally among EU governments. So the leaders prefer to appoint a supporting actor who comes from a small country and is not that famous, instead of an international superstar. And that would also leave room for a more eye-catching figure for EU foreign minister, which carries the real international oomph. Moreover, this could also dispel fears from small countries whose interests may be neglected if the boss comes from big economies.
And the next question is, what would the president actually do? He is the organizer of the annual EU summits, the mediator of the member states, and the spokesman of the Union. The president will serve for a renewable 2.5-year term, strengthening the current system of a rotating 6-month presidency. When the global financial crisis first swept across Europe in 2008, then EU chairman, French President Nicolas Sarkozy, publicly criticized the US and called for the reform of the international financial system. But all his efforts ended as his term expired. Now the European Union president has enough time to accomplish something. The EU has come a long way to give it to him. First, there was the EU Constitution in 2004. It was meant to streamline decision-making and stipulated creating a president. But the French and the Dutch rejected the constitution in 2005, fearing a threat to their sovereignty. A toned-down Lisbon Treaty was born in 2007. That took 2 years to win over the final holdout. Under heavy pressure, Czech signed on early this month. A new European Union may formally be in place by December the 1st.
We all are witnessing the extraordinary event now, an extraordinary situation. We are somewhere in the middle. We are at the end, on one hand. We are at the end of the ratification procedure. And we are at the beginning. We are at the beginning of building up the Europe stronger, more efficient, more effective.
The European Union rose from the ashes of World War II. In the half-century since 6 countries signed the Treaty of Rome, establishing the European Economic Community, the bloc's 27 members have enjoyed growing prosperity unmatched in their history. They've torn down borders. Most use the same euro currency. And they adopt common standards in everything from the death penalty to the weight of cargo trucks. But some critics say, while it's an economic giant, it's a political mannequin. The EU cannot shake off the spectre of the US, from the Iran nuclear issue to relations with Russia. And while the newly emerging economies like China, India, Russia and South Africa play an increasingly important role in international affairs, the EU's influence is waning. So it's determined to make itself heard.
I think that if there isn't a strong Europe in the world, then the future of the world will be decided by China and America without much reference to Europe. So it's a big and important choice about whether or not we want a strong European voice. I want a strong European voice.
And to go with that voice, there must be a face for the Union to take its proper place on the world stage. Some observers liken today's EU to the United States some 220 years ago. And what the new president faces is similar to what George Washington faced, uniting the country and making a unanimous voice.
We are living through exceptionally difficult times. The financial crisis and its dramatic impact on employment and budgets, the climate crisis which threaten our very survival. It's a period of anxiety, uncertainty, and a lack of confidence. These problems can be overcome by a joint effort between our countries.
But could Van Rompuy really become Europe's Washington?
What makes the EU unique is that it is neither a federal superstate nor merely an international organization. Each of its 27 members has its own national policies. They differ on many core issues, like whether the EU should go on expanding or whether they should use the same currency. It's extremely hard to build consensus.
The EU's first big boss will help define Europe's future. He has to make the EU about more than money and markets, such as common security and diplomacy. He'll have to make himself heard loudly and clearly on the international stage. The former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger once asked, "Who do I call if I want to call Europe?" Herman Van Rompuy, are you listening?
Herman Van Rompuy will begin his new job as president next year. Europeans hope that he will make his imprint, a European mark on world affairs. But the new leader is not a superman. The EU's integration has gone through a long process that's not over yet. Whether this recognizable face of Europe will end up becoming a success or not and embraced by the continent and the world remains to be seen. You're watching World Insight. Up next, dying for a hit when celebrities do drugs.